Thank you everyone for joining for this first business support webinar that we are hosting with a lovely panel of experts, which we hope it gives you all the reassurance and the information that you need for your business. So my name is Álvaro Costela. I'm the head of marketing of the Liverpool Bit Company, and together with Amaya, who is my right hand, we'll be looking after you today. I'll be picking any of the questions that we can see online, and I'll be directing those questions to the panelists, while Amaya will be spotting any questions online, through email, through social media, and she'll be putting them as on the Q&A actions on the webinar. So this is how the webinar works for you, for all our attendees. We cannot see you or hear you, but we know that you're there. So the ways in which you can actually interact with us are at the bottom of your screen. It's through the Q&A, so you can submit your questions. Some of you have already done it, so we have them on record and we'll be answering them. You can chat. Make sure that when you chat, you either select panelists or panelists and all attendees if you want everyone else to see it. And then you can also raise your hand. If you have a question that you'd rather say it out loud, raise your hand and we can bring you in so you can speak out loud and everyone can hear you. Then the other important thing to remember is like you can manage who you see. So if you are bored of seeing me all the time, you can check at the top right corner of your screen. You'll be able to see a gallery view if you want to see everyone, or just a speaker view, so you'll carry on seeing me all the time. And then just as a reminder, we are going to be recording this webinar. So if you don't get my lovely, super quick Spanish English accent, you can replay it later today. And then without further ado, because we are now have a full house, we are going to start the actual webinar. As I said, you can put your question on the Q&A section. You can put them on the chat. Remember, either to all panelists or all panelists and attendees, or you can raise your hand and we can bring you out loud. Okay, so we have a question that we have received earlier today over emails. So it's all the panelists. If you look at the webinar chat, it's about a business, and we have a couple of cases like this where the retail value is just slightly above those 51K, which is the threshold for the business grants. In this case, it's it will class as a retailer and leisure and hospitality business. So what will that be the advice that we can actually provide them? Especially because they're mentioning the fact that that retail value was valued 3 years ago. So perhaps it's not as relevant these days. Believe our very own Biladi could actually provide some advice.
Yes, thanks, Alvaro. This is a difficult position to be in. Clearly, the government set an upper limit of 51,000 as rateable value. And of course, the rateable value is established by the Value Office Agency, the VOA, and that is what determines rates. Although you're working off a rating list that is valued 3 years ago, it's still the current rating list. And so you can't ask to be a sort of an independent revaluation. The difficulty with this is that the only grants that are available, as we know, are the Small Business Relief Grant or the Retail, Hospitality and Leisure Grant. So the Small Business Relief Grant, which you should be applying for, and the links are here, and Alvaro will send the links for that again. That's for all businesses with a rateable value below 15,000 or 15,000 and below. For those with a rateable value who are in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector with a rateable value between 15,000 and £1 and 51,000, they can apply and should be applying. And those grants, I understand, the monies will be coming, if they're not today, they will be early next week for those who have applied, is £25,000 grant. For businesses with a rateable value above 51,000 and businesses above 15,000 but not in retail, hospitality and leisure, the direct advice the government are giving is that they use the CBILS, and we'll speak about that later, which is the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. That CBILS, we know, we've heard government have asked for some changes on that. But the question is, go to your bank and speak to the bank. That's the difficulty at this moment. There aren't any other further grants that I'm aware of that, because of coronavirus, that you can access. Don't know whether any of the other panelists want to add to that.
Anyone else have anything else to say? Yeah, Jason, yeah?
I just want to reiterate what I've just said there. It's going to speak to the bank, and I can't think of anything that's that's over that limit that's available currently. Whether it's going to get looked at or not, I'm not sure. But I think it's the CBILS that is the avenue there.
Okay. Yeah, one of the questions that we also received online, it was about, well, similar to this question. It was about a gentleman. He was saying that he rents a space inside a building and the owner of the building pays the business rates, which are included in my rent. This has been an arrangement for 20 years and have never had any bother. My concern is whether I'm able to access any grants because I'm not registered on the rate bills, as this is paid separately. Do you have any advice on what I can do?
Of the property, sorry, Alvaro, if you're the owner of the property.
No, he's renting and his landlord pays his business rates as part of the rent. So he's saying, what can he actually access? Because he's not the actual business.
If you're not a business rate payer, then the grants are not available to you. They are only available for business rate payers. So again, it's talking to your bank, the CBILS, the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. We'll call it CBILS from now on, but that's the only other option for you. Those grants are only available for businesses that have business rate liability, those that pay business rates.
Okay. I think this one, it's for you as well, Bill. It's asking us what support are the BID providing during this crisis and afterwards?
Well, we're currently providing, well, part of it is this webinar that we're doing now. So it's providing business support and business information for businesses, trying to disseminate the information that is out there and try and make that applicable and relevant for businesses, and trying to cut through that sort of all of the red tape and the long grass that's there. That's one side of it. You may have noticed that we've also partnered with Crowdfunder for businesses to access that, which is, again, is an opportunity for you to get cash flow by paying forward. So I would ask you to move to that. Currently our BID team are still working in the city centre. So we fund two Merseyside police officers who are based in our BID office, and they are working on a daily basis in the city centre, ensuring security within the city centre through an operational command that is given by our head of operations, who is linking the city council, the police, the businesses, Liverpool One, got a number of key shopping centres, St John's, Met Quarter, together into that forum. And excuse me, there is a WhatsApp group that's linked into that is responding on a daily. I mean, I've seen messages coming through very late in the night from some security people that we are able to pass through to Merseyside Police. So that's what we're doing actually at the moment, but also what we're looking at is a recovery plan, because this, we don't know when it will end, but it will end, and we need to recover from that. So we're working nationally, regionally, and locally on trying to pull that together, working with other partners in the city, so we can provide as much support to businesses as we possibly can.
Okay, we thank you, Bill. We have a question from Paul Massey, but I think we're going to bring you in, Paul, so you can talk us a little bit more, just to clarify your question. Paul, are you able to?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. So go ahead, Paul.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I'm not sure if you've had any feedback from anybody else within serviced offices. Obviously, appreciate the comment then, obviously, from Bill regarding it's down to the business rate payer who can actually claim. But there are obviously a lot of SMEs within serviced offices who are struggling to even just get the reference number from the provider. I don't know if you've encountered this or if you heard any stories about this at the moment, because obviously Liverpool, we do have an abundance of serviced offices, and it was just to ask if there's any advice that you can give, or if anybody has come across any other SMEs in the same situation as ourselves where we're even struggling to get our rate reference number.
Okay, any of the speakers?
I've not come across that, Paul. But if you can send through your details, I will raise that both on a national level, but also raise that locally with Regis. So if you can send that email through to us, and we'll pick that one up offline if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Which email address can Alvaro send an email to me or a message?
If you send it to info@liverpoolbidcompany.com, and we'll pick it up from there. And then the thing is, like, if we find out how to obtain that reference number, we'll just publish that on the website as well, so any other businesses can benefit from it.
Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. And okay, let me see more question. Okay, this is a question about business support from Paul Radcliffe. So I think it might be actually worth bringing up Paul to give us like a explainer. He's talking about if we are aware of a helpline set up by the Growth platform to help business in difficulty. So I'm just gonna bring you up, Paul. So let me just wait. Paul Radcliffe. Hi, Paul. Hello, Paul. Can you hear us?
Hello, Alvaro. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was simply to make the panel and the participants aware that there is a helpline that launched on Monday for all businesses in the city region that are impacted by coronavirus currently. Number of things that we're trying to do. Firstly, for businesses that aren't aware of eligibility or availability of grant support, we can signpost them through to that or advise if they are eligible or not. Secondly, if they are in one of the sectors where we have particular expertise, our sector teams can try and provide some sector-specific guidance. And thirdly, we've established a professional and business services pro bono panel where businesses with particular issues around trying to furlough the staff, hibernate the business, repurpose in other channels or directions, can get free pro bono advice, whether that be accountancy, legal, HR, or whatever. So the helpline is open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Myself and my colleague Lisa Ashby Dowling, who I think is also on the call, join this webinar from the helpline. So we are, all of us, doing our best to try and answer queries as they come in and signpost businesses through to whatever might help them at this difficult time.
Fantastic. Paul, I've just put that on the comments to everyone. So those details that you share with us, the telephone number and the opening times. Thank you. Fab. We have a question from security question. I think it's going for Bill. Bill is having the monopoly today. I need to visit my business to ensure the premises are secure and everything is locked up. Am I allowed to do this, or do I need to stay indoors?
Just picking up on that point, I think the guidance from Public Health England clearly depends on your own conditions. So unless you've got one of those screening letters or you have evidenced any symptoms of COVID-19 and you are locked in your own house, then if you're able to go out, that what they're saying is that only for very specific purposes. Clearly, the protection of your business properties is a specific purpose. If you've got any concerns about your business property, again, you can link that through, and Alvaro will give you the email addresses up there, because we have got, particularly for our levy payers in the city centre, we have got that security platform which is in operation. But as far as I would say, depending on your own particular condition, your own particular response to this, and you are able to go out, then you are enabled to go to visit your premises. But I know Troy particularly got a response about the insurance part of that.
Yeah, I think from an insurance perspective, a lot of insurers will naturally have within the policy wording a requirement to inspect and keep an eye on your premises when they are unoccupied. What we've seen is a lot of insurers take into account the current situation when handling these queries. But it does vary quite significantly between insurers, and it's something that if you've got a broker, have a chat with your broker to find out exactly what your insurer is expecting from you. But some insurers are relaxing the requirement to inspect on a weekly basis, back out to 30 days or even 90 days for some insurers, given the situation where obviously with social distancing and isolation. So it's worth checking if that's the reason you're going out, is to satisfy an insurance requirement, check the need to do so. But clearly, as Bill says, set the alarms, do the locks. If you've got any valuables or contents in the property, make sure they're out of sight and put away secure in the first place.
And I think, Charles, you also wanted to contribute?
Yes. I've had a similar question asked by quite a lot of employers about whether or not their staff should be going into work or not. And the guidance is that you are allowed to go to work if it's something you can't do from home. So the guidance for employers and employees is that if you can do the work from home, then that's what you should do. But the guidance does recognise that there's certain tasks that you can't do from home, and you still are entitled to go to work to do those tasks. So the guidance doesn't accept that you have to attend work in those circumstances. And so this question is similar to that in many ways. If it's out of necessity, then it seems to be permitted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. We have an insurance question, so I think that will be Troy. So they say, my insurance is up for renewal at the end of the month and has gone up significantly from last year, assumingly because of coronavirus. Despite the increase, they are yet to be paying any claims out. Do you have any advice? Troy.
It's a nice open question. There's a lot of variables with that one as well. I mean, insurance going up, I don't know what sector, whether they've had any claims, whether the sums insured have changed. There's a lot of variables that could dictate an increase in insurance. But I would say that, yes, understandably, the situation with coronavirus and COVID has had an impact on insurers, but that's not necessarily the driver for increases. There's been a lot of activity in the world that dictates pricing, be that natural catastrophes or increased legislation, which would impact from motor to personal injury claims. So there's a lot of variables and factors that drive insurance pricing. I would naturally say, if you're not happy with what you've been proposed, I'm more than happy to have a look at it for you. But at this stage, it's very hard to dictate or to even provide guidance as to why the premium's gone up without significantly more information.
Okay, we will facilitate further contacts of panelists and give our top tips. I mean, Troy is one of our consultants that we have a partnership with, so we'll be facilitating Troy's contact details if you have any further insurance questions. We have a question which I'm assuming it will be for Charles. They say, I have been put on a furlough by my company, but because of cash flow issues, they are only able to pay once the job retention scheme springs into action. What are my options? Do you know when this will happen? I'll go potentially for Charles, but if anyone else wants to come up, just remember to raise your hands. Charles.
Okay, so the guidance from the government is that the employer is still liable to pay wages when the contract says wages are due to be paid, and that the government will then reimburse employers for that. I'm aware that there are some employers who, for cash flow reasons, are simply not in a position to pay people their salaries now and then claim the money back from the government in what could be several weeks. The indications that I last heard were that the scheme should be up and running in terms of the online portal at some point in mid to late April, but that was about a week ago I heard that. I don't know whether there's been any updates on that, but that's the indication. This is the timescale before the portal's even up and running. In terms of the employee's rights, well, if you're furloughed, you're entitled to 80% of your salary up to a cap of £2,500 a month. That, under your contract, ought to be payable on the date that you normally get paid. If your employer doesn't pay you on that date, then potentially your employer's in breach of contract. The question then is, well, what can you do about that? Well, in normal times, one thing you might be looking at doing is raising a grievance, or even considering constructive dismissal, resigning and claiming constructive dismissal. Obviously, these are not normal times. And if your employer does have cash flow problems, and it's a genuine situation that they do have cash flow problems, then resigning and claiming constructive dismissal might not be the best thing to do. But advice for employers in that situation is, if you are having difficulty in paying the wages because you're waiting for the money to come through from the government, speak to your banks. Now, I appreciate the banks might not be able to help every employer on that, but if you speak to your banks and say, look, we've got an obligation to pay the staff, but we will have the money coming through from the government shortly, they may be able to get loans from the banks to cover that.
Okay, thank you, Charles. We have another question. This is from the guide, from Lee, which I think he's on the attendees. He's saying if there are any special grants or support mechanism in place to help us, like the guide, continue to deliver this service as effectively as possible. Besides what we mentioned earlier, I guess, like Jason and Keith, if you want to contribute. So it's about any other potential funding mechanisms or support mechanism for the guide, which is a media platform in the city.
I think the gentleman that came on before has obviously got the link to it there, isn't it? It's pretty much go to that. And I think speaking to your accountant as well is a good starting point for these sort of things. The literature that I'm getting seem to be very clued up on it, and offering services out there. So I think it's a good starting point to speak to your accountant. And then if not, obviously ourselves, obviously we're all learning it as we go as well. But we are doing what we can to point people in the right direction. It's not easy because obviously a lot of it's still not live yet.
Okay, thank you. An operational question. Are the bollards in Liverpool City Centre working as usual? What are the timings? Well, they are working as usual, and their timings they are up from 10 in the morning till 6 in the afternoon. So that hasn't changed because of coronavirus. One for you, potentially, Bill. Are the Blit Street Rangers in place for a strict cleansing?
Just to say that our Blit Street Rangers, because of their role on the streets themselves, we have actually furloughed the street rangers at this moment. It was a decision that we took. We considered it, and we also discussed with a number of other bids across the UK about whether they should be working. Clearly, we know that the city centre with less traffic, and if you've seen the footfall figures, you'll know if you've been in the city centre. We just felt it was more, it was better for the employees themselves for them to be furloughed at this time. That's not to say that we are not in constant conversation with Liverpool Street Scene Services Limited, the City Council, and are dealing with the cleansing in the city. And we're aware of some issues that hopefully have been resolved. So they're not there at the moment, but they will be ready to come back. And clearly, as soon as we can start moving back, they'll be in to do deep clean and get the city ready for to receive the visitors and to receive the people that will be coming back into the city centre.
Okay, thank you, Bill. We have a question, I believe it might be for Charles. An employee handed in their notice to leave for another company. They have since had their offer for employment rescinded because of coronavirus. Do I have to take them back?
Okay, the short answer to that is no, you don't have to. If somebody hands in their notice, then that is legally binding. And unless you as the employer agree that they can rescind the notice, then the notice stands. It leaves the employee in a particularly unfortunate position, but legally speaking, no, you don't have to allow them to rescind their notice.
Okay, thank you. Another one, I think this is really for Bill. If the services we receive as a levy payer reduced during the crisis, will the levy payments be reviewed?
I would say that clearly at this moment in time, we are changing the services we deliver, but we are still delivering services. But it is under review at this moment in time. But of course, it would be a board decision about that. And again, that impacts on the ability of the company to perform if we reduce or repay services. But clearly, this is impacted towards the end of the financial year. Levy bills are due to go out in June, and quite what the landscape will look like in June, nobody knows at this moment in time. So we are constantly reviewing it, but I would say that we aim to deliver a service for our bid levy payers that will continue to represent good value for them.
Okay, thank you. We had another question. I think this is from Laura. This is about general advice in terms of like what type of tactics businesses can do in terms of comms during these times, considering they cannot sell much. What can they be doing to still keep their business alive from a comms point of view?
I think at the moment, it's the basic strategy hasn't changed. Who are you trying to talk to? How do you want to talk to them? It's the second tactic of the question of how do you want to talk to them that might have changed at the moment. People are spending a lot more time online. So you have that option to, if you are selling something digitally, you have the option to be able to do that, making sure it's easy for people to do it. I would spend a little bit of time doing a little mapping of the channels you have and a bit of research into your audience. Where are they spending their time? One of the things I've noticed with clients is I had one retail client who sold primarily through digital sites anyway, but our audience shifted from being online on Facebook at 7:30 till 9:30 to within 2 weeks, 1 till 2 o'clock at lunchtime. So where they were online transformed like in such a short period of time. So spend a little bit of time understanding where your customers are and where your audience is. Doing that kind of, Google advertising is very cheap if you want to reach more people. Facebook advertising is incredibly targeted and also quite cheap. The key, if you're going to have changes in terms of how you're sending things out, or things are going to take a little bit longer, be really clear and be really honest. I think a lot of businesses are going to benefit from being personality-led and people-led, and reminding people you're a human and not a machine is going to be incredibly important. If you are usually sending something out to a customer and in normal times it would take 48 hours, but now you think it's going to take a week, just tell them and be really, really clear about it. And I think having that process open is key. Without knowing exactly what business it is, it's a bit difficult to be more specific, but I think just do a quick audit of what your channels are and just think, where are the gaps and how could you talk to people? And also as well, always think about yourself as the customer. Customers are not some weird different species from us. How are you receiving things from brands? How are you liking it? what are you not liking? And chances are, if you don't like something, your customer isn't going to like it either.
Okay, thank you, Laura. I think Bill wanted to say something. You raise your hand.
I was just saying that to add into that point was that what we launched yesterday was that the partnership with Crowdfunder UK, and this is a platform which all businesses can engage with. They can set up free of charge at this moment in time. There's normally a fee attached to this, but during the coronavirus, Crowdfunder are waiving all fees, and you can launch your own crowdfund platform, which will allow you to connect with your businesses, connect with your customers. Let's say you're a restaurant, you open up a crowdfunder page and you say to people, well, you can buy vouchers to come back into the business. It's been very successfully used. I saw one example, which was a brewery that raised £150,000 in 2 days because of the loyal client base. So that's one way of communicating with them. And just picking up on that point, the other part of the partnership is working with a company called Maybe Tech. And Maybe Tech will offer their platforms again. And their platforms allow you to understand how people are responding to your social media. And you are able to target your social media to enable you to improve the way that you communicate with your customers. So I would say, go and have a look at those platform that we launched yesterday. It is worthwhile all businesses looking at that and seeing how they can engage, because at this moment in time, it's about getting cash into your business in any way that you can to keep your business going, while your normal routes for cash are not happening.
Yeah, another thing thank you, Bill. Another thing to mention, it's the joint initiative that we have with the Guide and Independent Liverpool. And it's this local business guide, which is highlighting people who are still delivering and providing services during the coronavirus. So if your business is still doing some delivery or some remote services, make sure you get in touch with the guide so you can be added to the directory. The other thing that have actually launched yesterday as well, it's Culture Liverpool. Now it's compiling a list of businesses, organizations, or people who are actually providing culture and entertainment online. So this is kind of like a digital portal for culture and entertainment in Liverpool. So if you go to Culture Liverpool, you can also submit your content in there. So at least you increase your reach. We have a couple of questions here. I have applied for the small business grants. Do you know how long I will have to wait for it to arrive? I believe Bill might have the answer for this.
I don't have the definite answer. I'd just say that once you've applied for it, if you have received the acknowledgement email asking you to upload your bank details and you've got a reference number, then you should be getting that grant smoothly within a day or two. I'm told by the city, and I'm checking this, that the grant monies are starting to flow out. But it's the most important thing to note that they did have 1 or 2 hiccups with the system. We know 1 or 2 people had bounce backs yesterday. That was resolved. And then I've also picked up today that somebody had a bounce from the second part of the system, but i.e. when they uploaded the information, they didn't get the confirmation number. Provided you've had that confirmation number, then the cash should be coming to you, and it will be coming. As I say, it should be out by the end of this week. We were told that over 1,400 businesses would be paid by the end of this week. There are about 9,000 businesses in Liverpool that are eligible for this grant money.
Fab, linking to this question, one that just came up, it was asking whether if they can apply for both grants or just one, and it's only one. You can only receive one of the grants, either the small one or the business, leisure and retail grant.
Yeah, depending on your rateable value.
Yeah. We have one question, which I believe it's for our Charles. I have put my employees on furlough. I believe that this lasts for 3 months. What are my options after 3 months if things haven't returned to normal? Will I have to resort to redundancies? And I open your mic, Charles.
It's a very good question. And it's a question that I think everybody would be asking if we don't have an answer to what's happening by the end of May. The government announced a 3-month period for the furlough scheme. although it's an initial 3-month period, I think the government has accepted it might need to extend it beyond those 3 months. The 3 months start retrospectively from the beginning of March. So that 3-month period when people can be furloughed under the law as it stands will end at the end of May. But if things are not back to normal by the end of May, I think we'd have to anticipate that the government will simply extend the furlough scheme beyond the end of May, so that it will apply month after month for as long as it needs to apply. I say that because, quite simply, if by the end of May the government simply said you can no longer furlough people and employers, you now have to pay everybody's wages again, it's quite obvious that there'd be mass redundancies left, right and centre. Employers would be going out of business overnight, and the whole point of the furlough scheme in the first place would have been defeated if the government suddenly pulled the rug from underneath people. So I think the answer is the government is likely to extend it beyond the 3 months if things are not back to normal. If it didn't, then yes, redundancies are the likely alternative, or laying people off if there's a contractual right to lay them off.
Okay, thank you, Charles. One for Jason and Keith, and it's regarding an information that you share with us. If you can explain a little bit that information that updates on the insolvency laws and the trading rules that you highlighted with us, because it seems quite a valuable information for these times. If either of you want to have a go.
Sorry, Alvaro, what was the specific question again? Which bit were you referring to then?
It was about that information that you shared with us this morning about the insolvency laws and those proposed amendments.
Right, yes, about the wrongful trading.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a suspension on that. Obviously, anything, there's a specific period where they're looking at. Obviously, it's March for the next sort of 3 months initially, to tie in with everything else. So obviously the wrongful trading and them type of things, and relaxing it. Obviously, there's still going to be some onus on directors to be acting appropriately and honestly and following the rules. But obviously, whilst they're looking at their options currently, whether it's finance, whether it's solvency type situations, they will be looking at it, saying, well, there's a mitigation. There's obviously things that are going to impact on the decision making. So they're giving the directors a bit of breathing space on that front. HMRC are relaxing the winding up petitions on individuals and on companies. But most of this, what I'm seeing, all the feedback I'm getting from the people we speak to, is that they're there to help viable companies. So obviously, the funding that's going to be coming out to these people, they've still got to prove that there's a viable company at the end of the process. So they'll come out of this at the other end. What they're not going to be doing is giving money to what's essentially already a bust, a failing company. So I think people have got to look at the cash, get cash flows together and get financial information together that demonstrates that they can get access to these grants and this funding. Just expecting it and thinking they're going to get it is probably not right. I think they're going to have to be looking and demonstrate that they're viable for it. They're also not looking at, I've noticed today, they're not asking for personal guarantees. But again, there's going to be onus on demonstrating that there is a viable business there.
Okay.
Well, they're all very helpful things for the businesses, but how they actually work in practice again is, time will tell. We'll see.
Okay, thank you. We have one for Charles. He's been popular today. So, whilst on furlough with my company, can I go and work elsewhere, for example, a supermarket?
Okay, this is a question that's been asked quite a number of times over the past couple of weeks. And the government guidance doesn't give a clear answer to this, is the first thing to say. But if you listen to most online commentators, and most, I know Martin Lewis and other commentators have been talking about this quite regularly in their bulletins, and their view is that yes, you can, but you've got to be careful that in your employment contract, there may be a clause saying that you can't work elsewhere without your employer's permission. And if that's the guidance, then if that's what it says in the contract, you need to get your employer's permission in order to work elsewhere, as otherwise you could potentially be in breach of your contract. It does throw up an interesting question as well, which would be that if somebody was working in another job, they could end up earning more than they would have done in their original job. But that's just one of the anomalies, I think, of this system.
Fab. Thank you, Charles. We have another question. How do I apply for business rates reduction? Do I need to apply? If any of the panelists know the answer, raise your hand so I can open your mic. Yeah, Bill?
Yeah, I would just say, well, you should have already received information on that, because this small business rate relief has been in place for some time. So it was small business rate relief. In fact, you shouldn't be paying any business rates below £12,000 at this moment in time. And then there was tapered relief between 12 and 15,000. So if your rateable value is somewhere between £12,000 and below, and you've not been receiving it, then you need to contact the City Council non-domestic rates team. That's the simple answer on that one, because it's already in place. This grant is only to mirror that rate relief is there. And then, of course, going forward into next year, all businesses, so from now, sorry, we're already in the next financial year, all businesses that fall into the criteria that the government said, which is the retail, hospitality and leisure, would be receiving a full 12-month business rate holiday. That's regardless of rateable value. That's from the largest to the smallest. They will all get that relief. So it's a question of if you fit within that category and you haven't got it, then you need to apply for it. And we'll provide the link. We'll send that through to you for the City Council non-domestic rates team.
Okay, thank you. We're just waiting. If any of the attendees have any questions, don't be shy. Raise your hand and we can bring you in to ask questions live. You can have your 1 minute of glory in our webinar. We're just gonna check it out social media to see how it's going. To find a further question.
I think, while we're looking for questions, just to say if any of the panelists do have any further questions, or you want some answers or anything at all, then on our website is our info app box, which is being looked at constantly. We respond to that. So if you want to do that, come back to us. You can tweet us directly. You can tweet my own Twitter is Addy Consultancy, which you can DM me if you follow me. And my follow is open, so you can do that if anybody wants to speak. We are, as I say, working hard to try and resolve a lot of issues for businesses. And it's the same with all the panelists, isn't it? That we are available, as the panelists are available to respond to questions. So please do keep feeding them in. Likewise, I would say, keep looking at our social media feeds and our website for those information.
Let me see. So I think we can do something that it was really useful last week. So I'm going to put you all panelists on the spot. It's what's your advice for businesses? This could be the most common question you have been answering over this time that we haven't covered today. So any further advice that you can provide it as, yeah, so we have a tribute. So Keith, if you want to go first, go for it.
I think, obviously the services that Jason and I provide are probably services that businesses at this exact moment in time don't actually need, or a lot of businesses. I think what they're trying to do is to assess the position that's out there, what they're entitled to financially, dealing with their employees, getting the business into a position where they can then assess it and say, right, is my business now viable moving forward? Do I need to speak to professional advisors? And that's when people like Jason and myself will become involved. I think, like Jason said earlier, it's a bit of a moving feast at the moment. I think lots of different things are happening. From an advisory point of view, the government are getting involved to ensure that people are honouring what their intentions are. And I think just to similar to what Bill said before, to communicate with everybody, to have a chat with all of your suppliers, people who expect something from you as a business owner, so that you can manage their expectations. But I think everyone's in the same boat at the moment, and we're hoping that human beings give each other time to deal with all the problems that are arising, and not to feel that you're isolated. Something else, what we're doing today is very good for business owners, because it shows you that the people are out there who are willing to spend the time to talk to you, to tell you what is available and give you some help, hold your hand through this. But you know, you're not alone. Everyone's experiencing the same problems that you will be experiencing.
Okay, thank you, Keith. I think Jason wants to contribute as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on with Keith there, is that even if a business does get to the stage where they've assessed, you know, everything, they've gone down the grant route, they've gone down the small firm, you know, the loans, and they're finding that they're not eligible for that, and they're not eligible for this, you know, they're finding it difficult to tap into all of those things. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end for the business. It just means it might be the start of a different journey for them. And that's where they might then end up with somebody like myself and Keith, looking at them, how do we work it so that the business does survive, but not being able to tap into the government help, through not being eligible or being slightly outside of those, you know, the criteria. So we've just got to try and then be creative. And if the business is viable, we can then look at there is something new coming in, which is quite early in the planning, as part of the things I sent to you this morning. Which is similar to a CVA sort of debt relief orders type thing for businesses. And we're looking at them where it's going to be binding on all the creditors and things. So if you can't tap into money to solve the problem, it might be that you're looking at deferring payments and then spreading it out over a period of time, working with your creditors. You're all in the same boat. So hopefully people then, with HMRC support, creditors, suppliers and everything working together to help what is a good business other than the problems that we've got now.
Okay, so I guess that answered the question that we just have received. It's basically a business saying, I have 7 furloughed staff, I cannot get any grants as I don't qualify for a small business wage relief, and now my banks say I don't qualify for a loan because I could use my home as security.
Yes, I think that's probably somebody that needs to probably be looking a little bit more creatively and understanding what that business does, how it does it, and what is the impact of the current situation. Is it something that's decimated the business, or is it just something that's just delayed and prior to the problems was running great, and would run great again if the restrictions were lifted? So we just need to see how we can get through this period and not necessarily just throwing money at it.
So we put them, the best thing we actually put them in touch with you too. So you
yes,
can advise
at least having a chat then and see how we can be creative and what tools we've got available to help somebody like that.
Keith?
Yeah, can I just say, I'd add to what Jason's saying there. I think not to be giving any security to anybody until you've spoken to people like ourselves, to give you the professional advice on it, because granting security over your property without looking at a process that may go alongside that, in my opinion, it will not be in the interest of the individuals. You know, they'll be given time before they have to panic into doing something like that. You know, but getting the advice first and then doing it as a strategy would be the advice that I would give.
Okay. Fab, so we'll pass your details, because we've seen on social media a lot of people being quite concerned because they don't apply, or they're not eligible for any of the grants altogether, and their banks are not being that helpful during these times. So yeah, that reassurance will be good for them. Fab. Just mute you both. Anything else from Charles, Troy, or Laura that you want to highlight? Raise your hand. Any final? Yeah. Okay. We'll go for Troy. So Troy.
So yeah. So at Griffiths and Armour, we've obviously dealing with several inquiries every day, dealing with clients' concerns and challenges. Not least the lack of cover available, or perceptively lack of cover available on the insurance programs, and it's The challenge with insurance is that each policy is an individual contract between the business and the insurer. And whilst you may think that your neighbour has cover and you don't, it's really dependent on which policy is in place. So I'm not going to get technical on this call, but it's just to say, if you've got any concerns, any queries, drop us a line, contact Liverpool Bid, and we'll be there to sort of support in the background. I think what I would also say is that on Griffiths & Armour's website, we've got a dedicated section in our news and insights that's got regular updates on coronavirus advice. We're looking at working from home on occupied buildings. There's lots of different avenues that companies have taken, be that sawing vehicles off the road during this period to save themselves on motor fleet insurance premiums. I think some of the challenges that businesses will face, thinking about reducing wage rolls, stock values, turnovers, all of these can be considered as part of the insurance program, but I would urge you to speak to a broker or a professional advisor before making any changes. Same way as Keith and Jason were just talking there about putting security up. You don't want to just make changes without professional advice alongside. So we're more than happy to support you in these lines, but I'm sure if you've already got an advisor, then reach out to those guys directly.
Okay.
So just one more thing. Sorry,
okay, go for it.
Just because I was chatting to Bill about this the other day, and one of the key things, everybody's working from home, or a lot of people where you can are working from home, and the employer still has a requirement and duty of care for your staff, even though they're working from home. So as an employer, you still have to make sure that the environment and the working conditions are sufficient for your members of staff, but equally, GDPR needs to be considered, so making sure that if they're letting them use their own device, that the security and controls around that device, as well as your own networking systems. So it's quite wide ranging. It's not as simple as saying, yeah, just put your laptop up and log on. There are some quite wide ranging challenges potentially that could come down the line. And again, all our risk management team and advice and support, we can help you out with that if as needed.
Okay, thank you, Troy. I think Charles wanted to make a final intervention, and we have one more question. So, Charles.
Yeah, yes, there's a couple of questions that I've been asked regularly by my employer clients over the past week or so. One relates to holiday entitlement and what happens to holidays for people who've already booked holidays and who've now been furloughed. We don't have an answer from the government yet as to whether or not somebody can take holiday while they're furloughed, but we assume they can. We don't have an answer yet either as to whether or not someone who is furloughed continues to accrue holiday entitlement while they're furloughed. But the impression that most people have is yes, you still do continue to accrue holiday. But what the government have done, they've now, since last week, they've clarified that rather than people having to hurriedly take their holiday or otherwise they lose it, they've now said that people can take their holiday within the next 2 years. So there used to be a rule that you couldn't roll over a certain amount of holiday, whereas the government's now said, yes, you can do. So that's helpful that you don't suddenly get loads of your staff wanting holiday at the same time.
Good. Thank you, Charles. We have a final question. I took over ownership of a business after the 11th of March, but the business has existed for the past 10 years. Am I able to apply for the grants? Is that a question for answer for you, Bill?
Yeah, I can try. Yeah, I mean, this is always a difficult one because you would have to be registered for non-domestic rates on the date that the scheme came into being. So I would say if you are registered for non-domestic rates, which clearly you would be at some stage, that will come through to you when your acquisition goes through land registry. That's normally when it's triggered, then the VOA will pick it up. Generally, the non-domestic rates team will pick it up. But the key for it, if you wanted to apply for it, is you need the rating number. So what I would say is, if you have that rating number, you try. It might be that the people you bought the business off still had the rates liabilities, so possibly that would be something you'd have to discuss with them as well. But I think if you try it, all they can say is no if you don't ask that question. But I would have a go. Try and get hold of your rating number, which is provided by the local authority, and then apply for the grant. Can't guarantee you'll get it, but I would say apply for it.
Okay. I believe, Charles, you wanted to add anything else?
Yeah, just on from an employment law angle of that question, if the person asking the question was referring to one of the grants as the job protection scheme, the coronavirus job protection scheme, in other words, the furloughing scheme, you can still claim for that in that situation, as I understand it, because although somebody has to be on the books by the 1st of March, or by the 28th of February to be precise, in order to qualify for being furloughed. In this situation, this is someone who's bought a business or taken over a business that was already in existence for the previous 10 years. So furloughing should just apply as normal to that business, because it's only the owner of the business that's changed. The people who will have been on the payroll throughout.
Okay. Thank you, Charles. So I think that's it from us today. Thank you very much to our lovely panelists. Thank you for your patience and for your insights. Thank you for the attendees. We'll be making this webinar live later today or Monday. And just as a reminder that we have a lovely landing page, liverpoolwithcompany.com/coronavirus, where we upload all the latest business support. If you don't do yet, follow us on social media. Apart from following Bill, follow also Liverpool with Company, and also subscribe to get our latest emails, because Amaya and I were always working hard to make sure you get the latest updates. If you have any further questions, just send us an email to info@liverpoolwithcompany.com or through social media, or I don't know, however you can. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to our panelists. Have a lovely weekend, everyone, and enjoy your time at home.